So I've been a long time Apple Watch user, but I recently switched to this Garmin Forerunner. And honestly, I am really surprised. You see, I had this thesis that Apple Watches were just as good, if not better than Garmin watches. Plus, I always thought that Garmin watches were more of a status symbol cult thing, and they weren't actually that much better. But it turns out I was completely wrong. So I'm a travel nurse currently at Stanford University, and behind me we're at Half Moon Bay, about to run 8 miles today. I currently am marathon training, I do a lot of hiking and biking, and I've had this Garmin watch now for over 30 days, and I completely put it through the ringer to see if it really is better than the Apple Watch. So we're going to answer what's actually better about this, and if I would recommend the switch for you. I've been hesitant about moving from Apple Watch to Garmin for a long time now. The Apple Watch's Siri ecosystem, the screen looks crisp, the interface is fluid, and it just all integrates nicely. And to be honest, I didn't think that charging it at least once, sometimes twice a day, was really a big deal. But as soon as I started using this Garmin, I noticed some big things right away. Let's first start out talking about actually using it during activities. Just by looking at them, I just absolutely love the look of the Garmin, the circular pattern. It just looks and feels better to me. And I will admit, you do feel more like an athlete when you got this thing strapped on your wrist. It's like an emotional identity switch and you can't really deny it. Oh my lordy, I did not think I would love the physical buttons as much as I do. I didn't realize how much I was missing and needed these on the Apple Watch. You know, one of my first workouts, I was sweating more than a nun who just found out she was pregnant. And using those physical buttons instead of a clunky touchscreen was huge. But just after using these for some time, now the Apple Watch feels and kind of looks a little bit like a toy. I never realized how annoying a touchscreen was mid-run. After using the physical buttons to stop and start an activity, and yes, the Garmin's do have auto pause feature if you want, so you don't have to use this. They're just so much more superior than that 3, 2, 1 countdown on the Apple Watch. Like yesterday, during my 8-mile run, when I started that 3, 2, 1 countdown, it pissed me off, to be honest. I was just like, God, this is dumb. Now, when I'm actually in an activity, when I'm running, biking, or hiking, I found that I much prefer the Garmin data screens. They're much easier to read at a glance, and I feel like they have the most important information, it's just really easy to look at. Because of the Garmin's physical buttons, I actually never use the touchscreen on it. I just much prefer using physical buttons instead of the touchscreen. Now, both devices, you can customize the data screens throughout the activity. So if you want to change, what's displaying on a certain screen, you can do that on Apple. You can also do that on Garmin, and I find it easier to do on Garmin. But I also like, mid-run, all you have to do is hit the little down or up button to flip through the screens, and it's really easy. But when you're running with the Apple Watch, you're like staring at it funny, trying to get it to swipe, your hands are all sweaty, your mom's calling you, chicken nuggets. Overall interface is just better on the Garmin, especially for training. The screen overall just looks better, clearer. One of my biggest use cases is track mode right now. Both have a track mode. Okay, Apple Watch, you pick outdoor run and it'll pick up that you're at a track. And what's really nice about the Apple Watch is you can pick your lane. Garmin GPS is super accurate, so it's probably still picking up on that difference. It probably really doesn't matter. But besides that, Garmin absolutely takes the cake on the track. Track workouts are fast paced and you want to have the correct times. The Garmin also has these really nice beeps. It makes these sounds and it vibrates that'll tell you when you're ending near your rep, warn you about paces, pace changes, maybe you're running too slow or too fast. It'll indicate that. If you have AirPods in, it'll also send that to your AirPods. Again, this is stuff that Apple Watch does, but Garmin just takes the cake 100%. I'm just really surprised how much better it is at track data. On bike rides, it also became clear that I much prefer the Garmin screens versus the Apple Watch. And the same goes for hiking. One of my favorite features of the Garmin is route building. So there's many ways you can do this, but my go-to way is going onto Strava, and you can either save a map or you can create your own. And then once you go to start your activity, like running or biking, you just select a route in the navigation section, and it helps you navigate the course on screen. It'll send it to your headphones and also kind of beep if you're going off track. And it has a little arrow to point you in the right direction. To note, Apple Watch can also do this through third-party apps. I just love the ease of use and the Strava connection. From an actual data standpoint, part of my thesis was that Apple Watches give you the same data as a Garmin, right? Does the Garmin actually give you better data or not? The data after a workout is just so much easier to access to view. In the Garmin app, it breaks down everything. When I was just using the Apple Watch, I almost never actually looked at the data because in the Apple ecosystem, it's just not as easy to view your data. I just didn't find it very useful. I only really looked at Strava for the data. But as soon as you're done with the workout in the Garmin app, you can break down your cadence, pace changes, exact timing of each interval, lap times. Garmin just feels like an actual useful training tool, where Apple Watch is just kind of like a really basic tracker. And I always hated when I watch videos and people said that. I can't emphasize how true it is. From a GPS standpoint, they both have great GPS. Most people probably won't notice much differences. Common complaint on the internet is that Apple Watch actually underestimates mileage. And I noticed yesterday for the first time that my Apple Watch was quite behind the Garmin, and it didn't make sense. And the same goes for heart rate data. They're both very similar. They're both great. I would defer this to like the Quantified Scientist. He makes great YouTube videos breaking it down. Through his testing for himself, he's an N of 1 study. Heart rate data for him was better on the Apple Watch. But for me, when I'm using them at the same time, they're almost the exact same numbers. If you really, really care about your heart rate data, get a chest strap. It'll pair nice with both watches. Same thing goes for sleep data. I do also like the morning report from the Garmin better. It started to become addicting. I also use my Ultrahuman ring to track my sleep and data like that. And it seems pretty similar to the Garmin, especially like the overall length of sleep are pretty similar. Here's where I was very, very wrong. My thesis was that the whole charging battery life thing was just overblown. I didn't care about charging my Apple Watch once or twice a day. It just didn't bother me. I used to think it was fine until I didn't. Garmin lasted me over a week during my 2,000-mile road trip across the country. I never once had to think about it. Now I charge it when it's down to like 40% or so. That would last me another week. Like literally the battery life's like 2 weeks. And yesterday, I hadn't used my Apple Watch in a long time. It was dead. I charged it up to 100% and I took off to Half Moon Bay. That was about a half-hour drive from here. Then I went for that 8-mile run, which lasted an hour. And then I drove home. By the time I drove home, this was its battery life. Yikes. Now, so far I've pointed out things that I love about the new Garmin, but there is things about the Apple's ecosystem that wins. Apple Pay is just better. It's awesome. The thing I miss the most is probably Siri and timers. It's just so nice to have Siri on your wrist and tell it what to do. Especially notice this right away when I was cooking, because I usually just say, hey Siri, set a timer for 5 minutes. There's other nice ecosystem things. If you're watching something on your phone or laptop, you can easily change the volume. You can hit next. You can do those things. It's just harder to do on the Garmin. One of the first things I noticed when switching to the Garmin was the notifications. So if you have your phone open, Apple Watch will not give you a notification. Garmin doesn't differentiate. The other thing is Apple Watch has quiet notifications. Some apps send a bunch of notifications throughout the day, but they don't alert your Apple Watch or your phone. They just like end up on your notification screen. Well, this doesn't differentiate that either. My Ultrahuman ring sends me a bunch of notifications, and I'm tempted to turn them off because it gets a little bit annoying to get like 4 notifications an hour just from that alone. Speaking of, I just got one. And on the fitness and tracking things, I do think that Apple Watch is closer than some people make it out to seem. And Garmin has a ton of activities to choose from, but I do think that Apple Watch sort of wins in the strength training and workouts area. I like that you can just pick a generic workout. One of them I used to use a lot was just functional strength on days when I was doing just like rehab strength stuff. If I could go back and tell my earlier self, I would have got the Garmin sooner. What do I wish this Garmin had? I do wish it had the physical flashlight from the Phoenix, and the Phoenix also has a Siri, but it's like $1,000, which is a ton of money. And so one of the biggest questions is, do I actually recommend the Switch? If you run, bike, triathlon, swim, anything endurance at all, absolutely hell yes, it's better. It gives you better data. It's easier to use. Physical buttons are necessary for these type of sports. If you only strength train, go for walks, and you're already part of the Apple ecosystem, no, you don't really need a Garmin. One of the most annoying things every time I watch these videos is someone says, if you want a smartwatch with the ability to track fitness, get an Apple. If you want a sport watch with some smart features, get Garmin. I always hated that answer, but unfortunately, it's the truth. This is a sport fitness tool, and it's gonna help you perform better, but it's not the most like amazing smartwatch. This is a smartwatch, and it's lacking in more ways than I thought in the fitness categories, but it does the trick for like a lot of people. Unexpectedly, that's why so many people these days are wearing both watches, because there's benefits to both. Me personally, I haven't been wearing both. I just wear the Garmin because then I have the phone with me almost all the time that can do everything the watch could. But I completely understand why someone would want both watches. If you want deeper performance insights, Garmin all the way. Would I go back to just the Apple Watch? Hell no. The Garmin's my new daily driver. Let me know your questions, thoughts, concerns, commonly asked questions. Make sure you subscribe, yo.